Hi, before we start the film, I will let you know I will be at Twin Cities Con this year, November 11th, 12th, and 13th. I'll be selling my comics and artworks, and I have a table. So come see me at Twin Cities Con. We'll put the link down below so you can get your tickets early. There is a discount for that as well. It's at the Minneapolis Convention Center. We love to talk to fans. We love to see support of the show. So come see me at Twin Cities Con, November 11th, 12th, and 13th.
Now for the episode.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Lucio Fulci's famous film, The New York Ripper. Oh, now I'm starting to sound like Pee-wee.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great deals to tell us some upcoming movies to review. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out the webpage for critics' reviews as well as ours. And today we're going to talk about Fulci's most controversial as well as his most recognizable film, The New York Ripper.
Yeah, so Fred Williams is a grizzled New York lieutenant who's been tasked with finding a killer moving across the city with a gruesome predilection for young women. This killer uses a switchblade, a quacky duck voice, and is missing 2 fingers. Teamed with a psychoanalyst, the two seem to always be one step behind this sadistic killer.
So, with New York Ripper, it's hard to find which correct version. This is a movie that was also banned, I think, up to like 5 years ago in the UK.
And I think the uncut version is still banned there. They have a rated version that is heavily edited down.
Yeah, so when you talk about this movie, it's like, what version have you seen?
Yeah.
It's very different even from the theatrical movie, because if you see it now, there's a lot of things taken off from the theatrical release as well that you never be able to see ever again. So when you talk about this movie, there are multiple versions of this movie, as well as some places you can still not see this.
Yeah, I think like a lot of the more graphic Italian horror films, it's always based on, did you see this scene? Like, did you see this scene, and if so, you saw the uncut version. I think when we talked about Fulci's other film, Zombie, it was, did you see the eye scene there? And this was, did you see the nipple scene here? Yeah. And if you've seen that, you've probably seen the uncut version.
Yeah. Any opportunity for a female not to wear their clothes, this is it.
Yeah, he certainly finds it a lot.
This is also what's called Fulci's most misogynistic film. And that's one of the things that's heavily criticized talking about this movie, because compared to Zombie, this is very misogynistic, also very sexist, and very sadistic film. And that's another thing, is that so far the advances of 80 films, this one almost seems like it retracts from things that we're trying to get away from. Yeah,
I think every male in the film is some form of misogynist at the minimum.
Right.
Some of them are sadistic murderers, but like every male in the film is at least on the surface. Even Fred has a scene where he's with his prostitute friend, and she's playful with him, and he calls her, he's like, "Hey, why don't be a bitch?" And he just immediately decides to just kind of like throw around hurtful terms at someone he seems to have a fondness for.
You go make me tea. I'm not your wife.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of the connotations, and still horror fans have a hard time to digest this movie simply because of the misogyny in this movie.
Yeah.
And the overall point of view of females who are just the other vessel is the other woman who's just looking for audio recordings for her boss.
That's her husband, I think.
And her husband.
Boss man.
Husband boss man, just to play for him. Yeah. It's not that she's interested in it. She's doing it for him. Yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, I saw that as like, those are two slingers, man, like hanging out in New York, and, you know, they've got different ways of dealing with their love for each other. And, but yeah, there's a certain level of, violence against women. I think someone even had said, like, was it one of the screenwriters that said, like, this is Fulci's most I hate women movie. Yeah. And I see that. I do. I'm used to so much violence towards women in horror movies. It didn't surprise me that there was here, and I'm used to graphic violence from Italian horror. Not always so subjected towards one gender.
But at the beginning of the movie, you get a typical Italian horror movie of just, there's a hand in the bushes, and the dog gets it, and it's like...
Well, I love that, too. Italian horror films also, if they're set outside, if they're set in America, they got to make sure you know right at the beginning. It's like the skyline.
Yeah.
And then we come down to the hand. So,
yeah. But Fulci likes to do that, moving the camera kind of a thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So very much an Italian horror movie, so much that when they go to we talked about this before recording, when they go to New York, they think that they have to make everything so American. Even the names, even the director's names have to sound American, even though it's Italian-made film.
Yeah.
In fact, the point of view of, which is, they slip up sometimes because there's a car scene of the guy yelling at the female lady and she's like, ciao. Well, nobody says that in New York.
Yeah, I thought she was hip.
Right.
But it's true. Even, when you watch these movies, something I think we've never really discussed before is that they have to they change their names a bunch of times so that they could be credited as American sounding names so people would go see their films. I was talking with someone just after watching this, and I was talking about Andrea Occhipinti, I'm probably saying it wrong, who played Peter, and he was like, no, that was Andrew Painter. And I was like, no, it's this. And then all of a sudden I look at the poster and I'm like, oh, credited as Andrew Painter. Okay, yes. It gets really confusing to talk about the actors in the film.
It gets confusing to talk about these films. So, like when it came out, it was still hard to digest. It's one of those shocking movies, and it's one of those Fulci's. I think he was not looking for a misogyny just to exercise his point of view, but he thinks he wants to put it onto the film as an exercise. I want to compare it to like Alfred Hitchcock with Frenzy, which is a very misogynistic movie, very sadistic, but it's crafted that those are the character's point of view, not the director's point of view. And I think Fulci, with this film, it gets labeled that this is his point of view also.
Yeah.
In which he's not separating the film's point of view from his point of view. We just talked about Barbarian, which has very much a feminine center, that all the men are kind of not really helping the cause.
As here.
Yeah, as here, where the men are not really helping the cause. But it also, with Frenzy, Alfred Hitchcock was presented the film as that's what it is in that world. It gets labeled that this is Fulci's point of view.
Yeah, and I think if Fulci didn't have so many moments where this is hinted at, it probably would be more of a argument against it. I don't know Fulci personally. We haven't gone out for a beer. But just, it seems like most of the people that have worked with him kind of were like, yeah, he's got this kind of like up the violence level. He called this his Hitchcock tribute film. He said, removing all these elements that I'm known for and just getting hard down to this giallo-esque Italian.
Yeah, it's very giallo. Yeah.
And having it be a tribute to Hitchcock with the kind of viewpoints and the angles and the cinematography at play. I don't really see what he sees in the film.
I don't know. I don't.
I see. I mean, I see what he's saying. I just don't really think. I think in his mind, this is more of a Hitchcock film than it is for me. But yeah, there's on display there. There's the detective hunting the killer, who's killing the women, and it's always graphic because it's Fulci. The effects are incredible.
The killing scenes are. Yeah.
There's the eye scene, the Fulci eye scene that you always have to have, where the eye is still moving after it's been cut, and that is like I don't often get bothered, but I was like, it's still going.
Right, it does that. Yes. So but it's that he never got divorced from the artist. That I'm trying to present this movie that men can be this way, but also he gets labeled that.
Yeah.
And we don't really know the authentic. He never really shy away from that. People criticize him from that. He never outright spoke that I'm trying to present misogyny to fight against misogyny.
Yeah.
He never really out against it, where Alfred Hitchcock said this is the point of view of the characters in the story. It's not my point of view.
Yeah.
But it's also Alfred Hitchcock had a lot of controversy as well. We find out from the biographies of how he treated people on set as well.
Yeah, I think that's a case of either or, whereas this is a case of both and, where they're both true. Where you can have Fulci being a misogynist and also making a movie about men are misogynistic, and not realizing it that he's.
Well, there's that scene in the movie, just like Frenzy, what happened? Oh, beautiful woman got murdered. Oh, really? Yes. And it's
the coroner who's rating it's not bad. I'd give it an 8 out of 10 for murder.
Right, yeah. So a lot of things that are unnecessary if you want to talk about misogyny, but it's also oh my God, you have to go there again.
Yeah, it's on display, and I think there was also that question of how does he view New York City. Because apparently that was a bit of a controversial thing at the time, with people who lived in New York saying, that's not what New York is. But I've known a couple people that did live in New York at that time, and they said, that kind of was what New York was at times. Like, not all of it.
Depends on the time of the day,
depending
right?
on where you were. It's kind of like what I tell people about, like, there's certain areas of Minneapolis that I don't go to at certain times of the day, and like there's certain places in New York I don't go to at certain times of the day.
Right.
And
we talked about the Barbarian. There's certain places in Detroit you're just not supposed to go.
At all.
Right. At all. Right. So with New York Ripper, the title gets me because it's like he's supposed to put the Jack the Ripper and all that stuff. So you're trying to draw in the audience of a sophisticated serial killer, but then when you get to the details of like the unwrapping, like this is so silly. It's Argento almost, like this doesn't make any sense almost.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point of a giallo. It doesn't
Yeah.
really make a whole lot of sense. It's the avenues to get there.
Well, it's a better title than What the Quack or something like that.
Right. The quacking just bothers me. It's like, it's so ridiculous.
It's one of those areas where I think when you're initially pitching the idea, you're like, okay, and seeing where it plays out in the narrative, how it fits in, you're like, I can see what you were trying to do. I wouldn't have done it, or I would have gotten to like day 2 of shooting and been like, maybe not. But I'm also the person who really hates the killer's voice in Black Christmas, that like screaming, yelling voice on the phone, because I just find it annoying. I kind of find the duck quack annoying.
Right. We had that in the late 70s and the early 80s of we have to call in horror movies, use the phone, but you have to mask your voice with this ridiculous,
like it's just
because we couldn't text them.
This film, for all of its, I would say maybe simplicity, has 4 screenwriters. And so I wanted to give a little bit of background, and so I did a little research on this. So we have Gianfranco Clerici and Vincenzo Menino were the first two credited writers. They both worked on Devilfish together. One of them did Cannibal Holocaust as well. And they wrote originally
Another
idea.
controversial movie.
Maybe they're known.
Yeah.
They wrote a script about a killer who had progeria, and so the idea being that. But they also had a lot of elements that were in the finished product as well. And so the idea was that they were going to get this film to a different director and kind of springboard it as something else. It was the director of Cannibal Holocaust, Ruggero Deodato, was going to be set to direct their script.
I see.
For some reason, this thing ended up in Fulci's hands, and so he hit up with Dardano Sacchetti, who also worked on things like Devilfish, who also rewrote the script a lot of times. He did a lot of uncredited Italian rewrites. They got the script, and it became this film. Now, what's funny is that the idea that they had about the progeria killer would later become a film called Phantom of Death. So that script that they wrote actually kind of diverted into 2 completely separate films.
Interesting. So it's like an idea of a concept, but it's effective this way, but let's go this way.
Yeah.
And I've already talked about different avenues with giallos. Yeah, giallos. That you have to have a signature psychotic break for your killer.
Yeah.
Or a reason.
And what's interesting, as far as giallo goes, is that tends to be a person with a knife, but it's usually a more like theatrical weapon. I was surprised that it was just a switchblade here, but that kind of goes into the film is not also overly giallo looking.
No, not
it doesn't have the flashy Technicolor dream that we kind of associate to. So that's why I kind of go, it's kind of giallo light. It's a little
but heavy
bit.
on the misogyny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Misogyny heavy, giallo light.
Yeah. All right. Up next is our we've already kind of stapled with our review of New York. So, this is actually the first time I've ever seen this movie.
Me too.
And you are kind of, I wouldn't say an aficionado, but you're a massive consumer of Italian horror. This is
Recently,
recently, and you are very familiar. So I just want to start with your overall view of this movie.
Yeah.
From the Italian horror aspect, because there's a lot of faults for Italian horror.
So let me be clear. I'm not condoning any of the characters with this review, but I'm saying that I found the film incredibly exciting, incredibly interesting, and incredibly unusual. And that's a good trifecta for me, is that I don't really... There's a lot of elements that don't work in the sense that if I took the film more seriously, they wouldn't work. But I've always kind of gone to Italian horror with a sense of, I want to have some fun. I want to see something weird, messed up, and something I can't see in American cinema. There's very little of this film that you could see translating in America.
Right.
We look at films from the 90s, like Japanese horror films from the 90s getting remade in the 2000s. There's a reason that didn't happen very often with Italian horror films getting remade into Americans, because it just wouldn't even be the same film at all.
Right.
So
yeah, it's very, if you like the giallo Italian horror movies, this one pushes the boundaries. I think you wouldn't be, I don't think, appreciative, won't be recognized without so much of the controversy behind it.
Yeah.
I think it would be just one of those things that you just toss away, but now there's a lot of things banned about it, a lot of things that still are in there like, wow, all right. Even for 1982, like, okay, you have a full-on sex scene, and they really are having sex in it.
Yeah, that was shocking.
They really are doing it, like Caligula with Helen Mirren. But yeah, it's still stuff that's hard to digest, and I think that's why the longevity is. It's still shocking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's shocking in a way that I think...
But also the misogyny is still shocking. It's like,
when you watch the film, you've got to be someone who can watch a movie and not be bothered by those things to get an experience of I don't want to say enjoyment, get an experience that's worthwhile to you.
It's fascinating that the murders aren't the shocking thing. It's the other aspects.
Yeah. Well, there's one murder that I found particularly shocking. The prostitute murder was a lot, man.
Oh yeah,
I'm
after
one of
the
those
scene
people
in their waiting room.
Yeah. I don't know why. We tend to have this thing. Men tend to talk about like, well, there's one thing I don't want to see you cut off of a man in a movie. And women have that, kind of the same thing there. Yeah. I don't get bothered too much by the man. Like, I've watched Hostel Part 2, and that thing gets chopped off. I'm like, hey, go for you, man. Yeah. I have a lot of trouble seeing, like, this area getting cut or, like just those kinds of spots. Yeah. Certain things really just, ooh, that's too much for me. This one pushes the envelope to the very limit where I did look away, which I appreciate because it's not often I do have that intensity. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I found the experience very thrilling for that. So let me be clear, it's not a movie that's going to work for everybody. In fact, I think it's a very small niche of people who can throw away all the controversy and take the film at face value. My wife will never enjoy this movie. I didn't even try watching it with her after I heard about it. I was like, there's no chance she's going to enjoy this.
But and so cool. Like a lot of things for the 80s where there's a lot of pushing boundaries and talking about, events and like expand monsters and a lot of creativity that moves forward. This looks almost like we're taking a step back.
But it's hitting it with that 80s no excess that you always talk about.
Yeah, and it's also that you actually, after end watching this, you actually want to take a shower.
That's true.
It's
absolutely
true.
You
feel contaminated after seeing this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always found, so in the criterion of Italian horror, I've always found that I enjoy the supernatural stuff a little bit more. When we talked about Tenebrae, and I told you, Tenebrae is like my favorite not really supernatural kind of giallo film.
It's very clean.
But like with that film, I will always prefer Suspiria. It's just it's a movie I found more exciting because of I like monsters. I like supernatural stuff.
It's whimsical almost.
And so in that criterion, like I will always be, if you put up two Fulci films, Zombie and New York Ripper, I'm going to pick Zombie 9 times out of 10 because I just like monster movies. Yeah. This is a movie, as far as giallo-esque movies go, as far as the killer stalking the victim, it's exciting. It's entertaining. Yeah, but at the same time, it's a movie that I'm like,
I'm not really need
to go wipe myself down.
And I'm not really eager to return.
Yeah.
And I've seen it once, and it's like, okay, I appreciate. Sure, I've seen it just to say I've seen it, but I don't think there's not a lot to retain from it other than seeing it and why it's so controversial.
Yeah, I think it's the context of the controversy, being a film that. There's a lot of other Italian horror films that I will go to first. Even I tend to watch a lot of ones for the first time because, like you said, I'm very much baptized now in the world of Italian horror, but it's only been since like 2014. I remember staying up super late in the night to watch Suspiria, and then the next night watching Demons and going, where has this been all my life? Like, what have I done? But there's a certain thing, it's a badge of honor kind of a film, which is how I feel about this movie, was that there's a certain thing where like you want to tell people about this like crazy messed up movie. I just watched Troll 2 for the first time last week. It was a movie. Yeah, it was a movie that I had to go around and tell everybody like, man, I finally saw Troll 2. That's a badge of honor on my Boy Scout vest. That's kind of what this movie is.
Starring Harry Potter.
Yeah, that was
characters. So overall, I think if you're a horror fan, it's one of those like, have you seen it? It's one of those barometer litmus tests kind of a movies. Litmus test, like, have you seen it? And then your reaction to it, like, it's very acidic or it's very base. How do you feel about that? It's almost like a barometer of your taste for horror movies. And I say this is not my taste.
Oh yeah. I just think like when I look at something like the extreme violence stuff, I would rather have a New York Ripper that is so insanely over the top compared to a film like Martyrs, which I found was like very well made, but almost so serious that I just can't get any excitement out of it. It's a draining experience. A very well-made movie. I gave that film a plus, but it was also a movie I said I don't really want to watch again.
It's one of those suffering to suffer.
So I'll always pick Zombie over this. I'll pick this over something like Martyrs because it's just so insanely goofy that you can kind of devoid yourself from a lot of the disturbing elements.
There is a goofy element, especially the quack in the voice, of trying to soften up the presentation of what you're really, the shocking of it.
I have one question for you, though. There's been this little, kind of like a discussion online about who the killer is. Because at the end of the film, spoilers, you should have already watched the movie. It's on Shudder. Go check it out. Yeah. We find out that Peter is the killer, the guy who we were already given as a red herring, but then he actually is. Now there's the question that comes from people, was Fulci trying to say that the daughter was psychically telling him what to do?
Oh, through like waves and stuff.
Yeah, because there's always that kind of trope of like the kid in bed who's got like the psychic powers.
The kid's reeling the duck story, and it's all like sending psychic powers to her. Yeah, that's an interesting theory. I didn't think about that.
A lot of people I have had this conversation now a couple times where it's been, is it that way or is it this way? And it's never fully given like credence to it, but there's hints that maybe the daughter is doing more work in the film than expected, or maybe she doesn't understand what she's doing. But it's an interesting idea.
And then the reason why he kills women is because the daughter knows that she'll
never become
a woman.
Yeah. And so it's that kind of, I find it interesting that way, although that might be just an argument to kind of remove
soften the
misogyny. Yeah. So I don't really know. Maybe it's an argument that makes you feel a little bit better about watching it, but I don't know if it works. It's kind of, I like those kinds of ones where it's not 100% given in, but it works both ways. So,
so have you seen the New York Ripper?
If you have, you probably haven't forgotten that you've seen the New York Ripper.
Right, it's unforgettable.
Yeah, pull out that Boy Scout vest and show us the badge of honor that you made it to the end of the movie. Let us know down below your thoughts on the New York Ripper.
Yeah, please do.
There's a lot of other Fulci, actually. Just even researching this film, I found a bunch more that I want to watch, and these are the only two I've seen a zombie in this. So let us know what the next Lucio Fulci film we should talk about is. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Did he do House of the Cemetery?
House in the Cemetery is one I want to do. That's one I want to get to eventually.
It's one of those, that little kid. Damn it. It has that little
Italian horror with their little kid problems.
I just want to sock that kid.
Yeah, and then make sure that while you're down there commenting your thoughts on the film, that you like and subscribe. We love having the comments and having the back and forth, and helping the channel grow is only going to get you more and more episodes of the show, which is something we both want to do. Yeah. So please make sure you do that. And like Nick mentioned below, check out the Patreon link. It's down there. Check it out. Give us a look. And you can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And it's in St. Paul, not in New York City.
Yeah.